Verse 15 is in the aorist tense. What shall we say then? Shall we lightly commit acts of sin because we are no longer under a mere principle of outward command, but under a principle of inward grace? God forbid. Verses 1 through 14 deal with the Christian, the impossibility of living a life of sin. Verses 15 through 23 teaches us we cannot take even one act of sin lightly. The wording is entirely different in the language of the New Testament. Look at your outline. The question is, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. The declaration is, how shall we, who died to sin, live any longer therein? What we would expect is, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. We would expect at this point a list of do's and don'ts. Don't go to movies. Don't drink and smoke. Don't do these things. Do this and this and this and this and live a godly life and just tough it out and discipline yourself. That's not what he says at all. That's what we would expect today. This list of do's and don'ts, this strive to be godly and live a holy life and so forth. This is his answer. Such ones as we are, hoitines, it's a qualitative personal pronoun in the Greek. Such ones as we are, the very ones who died to sin. How can we possibly live any longer therein? What? We're not dead to sin. Verses 1 through 10, every occurrence of the word is died, 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 died. An event, aorist tense, not dead, not a state, but died. By virtue of our union with Christ, we were brought into union with his death, and that means that the reigning power of sin has been broken. By virtue of his resurrection, we've been brought into his resurrection life, and that means that the same power that has raised up Christ from the dead now is the dynamic of the believer's life. It's the work and power of the Spirit of God. A converted life is not only possible, it's necessary by God's grace. So this is his declaration, verse 2, and the explanation of it. Know ye not that so many of us as were identified. I take this word baptism to be used figuratively. Identified, and this is a legitimate use of the term. It isn't baptismal regeneration. So many of us as were baptized or identified into Christ were baptized into his death. Therefore we were, it's all past, we were buried with him by identification in his death. That like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glorious exercise of the Father's power, even so we also in newness of life must walk. For if we have been grafted, grown together in the likeness of his death, also in the likeness of his resurrection we shall be. Knowing this, that our old man, the old unregenerate self, was, past tense, aorist tense, was crucified with him in order that the body as dominated by sin might be stripped of its role, in order that henceforth we should no longer serve as willing bondslaves to sin. When Adam fell, Adam was originally righteous, not merely innocent. Originally righteous, he was governed by a righteous mindset. When he fell, he was no longer guided by a righteous mindset. He suffered from the noetic effects of sin. It affected his thought process. The body with its appetites became the predominant feature in his personality. The body became the boss, and nothing's changed in so many thousand years. When God saves us, the body's no longer the boss. And you'll see this reiterated throughout this chapter. Let us go on. Our old man, the old unregenerate self, was crucified with him in order that the body, as dominated by sin, might be destroyed, is stripped of its dominating power, in order that henceforth we should no longer serve as willing bondslaves to sin. For he who died is freed from sin. Sin has no claim upon him. That word is in the perfect tense. It's the word justified. He's justified from sin. When we're justified, God's law has no claim upon us. When a man is justified, he's freed from sin. Death has no claim upon him. Sin has no claim upon him. Now, if we died with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ, being raised from the dead, dieth no more. Death hath no more dominion over him. For the death that he died with respect to sin once, but the life that he now lives, he lives with respect to God. Verse 11, Likewise reckon ye also yourselves to be dead indeed unto sin, but alive unto God in Jesus Christ our Lord. The word dead in verse 11 is not a verb. Up to this point, it's all verbs. This is nekrous. It's a noun. It's a substantive. It means a corpse. We are to reckon ourselves to be corpses, unresponsive to the solicitation of sin. And we see this in verses 12 and 13. Let not, let not, let not. It means the reigning power of sin has been broken. Let not sin, therefore, reign in your mortal body, that ye should obey it. And the word it refers to body. Neuter in the Greek, not feminine, referring to sin. That ye should obey it in the lust thereof. The body's no longer the boss. Neither yield ye your members as weapons of warfare. Hopla is the word. Of unrighteousness unto sin. But yield yourselves unto God as those that are alive from the dead. And your members as weapons of warfare of righteousness unto God. Sin is dethroned. The reigning power of sin has been broken, but it seeks to wage a guerrilla warfare. We still sin. If we died now to the reigning power of sin, how is it that we still sin? We died to the reigning power of sin, but we're not dead to sin. Christians commit acts of sin. They don't live in sin as the ungodly do. They commit acts of sin. 1 John chapter 2 and verse 1, my little children, these things I write unto you, that you do not commit an act of sin, aorist tense. And if anyone does commit an act of sin, an advocate we have with the Father, Jesus Christ, who alone is righteous. We commit acts of sin. We deal with these issues, but we no longer live a wicked, unconverted life as the ungodly do. What then? Shall we lightly commit acts of sin because we are not under the law? Oh, verse 14. For sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under law. No definite article. Not under law, not under a mere principle of outward command, but under the dynamic of enabling grace. The law could command, but the law could not enable. Grace enables. That's the difference. It's not a dispensational misinterpretation of the passage. The law was an external command. God writes the law on the heart. The doctrines of grace lead to righteousness and holiness, not to antinomia.